Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I moved to this quiet lakeside community 5 years ago, seeking a peaceful life away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I'm an artist with a chronic illness that affects my mobility, and I hope the serene environment would help my health and inspire my work. Little did I know I was stepping into a neighborhood ruled by a group of self-appointed tyrants masquerading as a utility improvement district. When I first arrived, I was charmed by the beautiful lake and the friendly faces of my neighbors. I even attended a few community meetings, thinking it would be a great way to get involved. And that's when I started to notice something was off. The board members seemed more interested in policing their neighbors than actually improving the community. I tried to keep to myself, focus on my art, and manage my health. But as time went on, I couldn't ignore the growing tension in the neighborhood. People were moving away, citing harassment from the board, and the final straw came when I got my donkey, Daisy. Daisy isn't just a pet, she is my official assistant animal, helping me with my mobility issues and providing emotional support. The county approved her presence on my property, which met all the necessary requirements. But apparently, that wasn't good enough for our local busybodies. It started with threats of a lawsuit. Then they showed up at my replat hearings, which had nothing to do with Daisy, mind you. They were about a shed I wanted to build, but there they were, crying about legal expenses and property values. The head board member, who owns a rental across the street, seemed particularly bothered by my donkey's presence. Things escalated quickly after that. They filed a discriminatory lawsuit against me, claiming Daisy was a nuisance. When the trial date was set for next April, they got impatient and asked the judge for a restraining order against my donkey. Yes, you heard that right. A restraining order against a donkey. The day of the hearing arrived and I found myself sitting in a courtroom fighting for my right to keep my assistant's animal. The board's lawyer stood up, looking smug. Your Honor, we are requesting a restraining order against the defendant's donkey. It's a constant nuisance to the neighborhood. How so? It brays, Your Honor. And how often does this donkey bray? Periodically. I rolled my eyes. If only they knew how rarely Daisy actually brayed. I stood up ready to present my case. Your Honor, if I may, I've been keeping detailed records of Daisy braying. On average, she brays 1.9 times a day, with a median of 1.5 and a mode of 0. Each bray lasts between 3 to 8 seconds. She only brays when she's happy to see me and the weather is nice. She won't make a sound if it's raining or too windy. The judge says, that hardly seems like a nuisance, counselor. But Your Honor, the property values, let me stop you right there. Do you have any evidence that this donkey is actually affecting property values? The lawyer stumbled, unable to produce any concrete evidence. I decided to push my point further. Your Honor, if we're talking about nuisances, one of their bees stung me just the other day. You don't see me trying to get a restraining order against their bees. The judge actually chuckled at that, and I knew I had won him over. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out a folder filled with documents. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence of the board's misconduct. They've been dumping sewage into our lake at levels far beyond EPA regulations. They've harassed terminally ill residents, attempted to steal property, and generally abused their power. This lawsuit is just another example of their bullying tactics. The judge's expression hardened as he looked through the documents. He turned to the board's lawyer, who was now sweating profusely. Counselor, are you aware of these allegations? Your Honor, we're here about the donkey. No, I think we're done talking about the donkey. This case is dismissed. Furthermore, I am recommending a full investigation into the board's activities. This behavior is unacceptable. As we left the courtroom, I felt victorious. The board members looked shell-shocked, realizing their reign of terror was coming to an end. My neighbors who had come to support me were cheering and patting me on the back. In the weeks that followed, the investigation uncovered even more misconduct by the board. They were forced to step down, and the new, actually elected board took their place. The sewage dumping was stopped and efforts to clean up the lake began. As for Daisy and me, we continued our peaceful life, braying happily whenever the sun shone. It was just another ordinary Saturday evening at our house. My wife and I had settled into our new home about 6 months ago, a cozy two-story in a quiet suburban neighborhood. We'd moved here for a fresh start after I got a promotion at work, wanting a safer place to raise our two kids, aged 8 and 10. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner while my wife was upstairs taking a shower after her evening jog. The kids were in the living room, sprawled on a couch watching their favorite cartoon show. Everything was peaceful, just the way we liked it. Little did I know that our lives were about to be turned upside down by an entitled drunk driver. I had just put the lasagna in the oven when I heard an ear-splitting crash from the living room, followed by the terrified screams of my children. My heart nearly stopped as I sprinted towards the noise, fearing the worst. What I saw when I entered the living room was like something out of a nightmare. A massive black SUV had plowed right through our front wall, demolishing half the room. Debris was everywhere and my kids were huddled in a corner, crying and visibly shaking. "Oh my god, are you two okay?" I rushed to check on them, relief washing over me when I saw they only had minor cuts and bruises. As I was comforting them, I heard the SUV's door open, and out stumbled a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s, dressed in expensive clothes and reeking of alcohol. "What the hell is wrong with you people? Who built a house in the middle of the road?" I couldn't believe my ears. Was this woman seriously blaming us for her crashing into our house? "Lady, you just drove into our living room. My kids could have been killed." "Don't you raise your voice at me. Do you know who I am? I'll sue you for every penny you've got." By this time, my wife had come running downstairs, shocked by the scene before her. "What happened? Oh my god, the kids!" She immediately went to tend to our children while I dealt with this belligerent woman. "Ma'am, you're clearly intoxicated. I am calling the police." "Go ahead, call them. They'll see that this is all your fault for having your house here." I ignored her ranting and dialed 911, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. While we waited for the police and ambulance to arrive, the woman continued to hurl threats and insults at us. "I'm friends with the chief of police, you know. You'll all be sorry when I'm done with you." "Lady, just shut up and wait for the cops to get here." When the police arrived, they were astonished by the scene. They immediately brutalized the woman, and unsurprisingly, she was way over the legal limit. As they were putting her in handcuffs, she was still shouting threats. "You can't do this to me. I'll have your badges for this. And you." She looked at me. "I'll see you in court." Officer tells her, "Ma'am, I suggest you remain silent." The paramedics checked over my kids and wife, confirming that their injuries were minor, but recommending we take them to the hospital for a thorough examination just in case. As we were about to leave for the hospital, one of the officers approached me. "Sir, we'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a full statement. Given the circumstances, you might want to consider prison charges." You can bet I will. This woman nearly killed my family. In the next few weeks, we had to stay in a hotel while our house was being repaired, deal with insurance claims, and attend multiple doctor appointments for the kids who were understandably traumatized by the incident. But the real battle was just beginning. True to her word, the woman, whom I'd started referring to as Karen in my head, tried to sue us for negligent placement of our house. It was so ridiculous that her own lawyer advised her against it, but she insisted on going forward. That's when I decided to fight fire with fire. I hired the best personal injury lawyer in the state and filed a massive lawsuit against her. The charges included property damage, reckless endangerment, driving under the influence, and emotional distress. As the case progressed, we learned more about Karen. She was a widow of a wealthy businessman and had a history of entitled behavior and minor run-ins with the law, always managing to get off with a slap on the wrist due to her connections and money. But not this time. The evidence against her was overwhelming. There were multiple witnesses who had seen her driving erratically before the crash, the breathalyzer results, and of course, the fact that she had driven her car into our living room. The day of the trial arrived and Karen swaggered into the courtroom like she owned the place. Her lawyer looked resigned, probably knowing they didn't have a leg to stand on. The judge says, "We are here today to address a case of my last name versus Karen's last name. How do you plead?" Karen's lawyer, "Not guilty, Your Honor." The trial proceeded with both sides presenting their cases. Our lawyer was brilliant, methodically laying out the evidence and calling witnesses who testified to Karen's reckless behavior. When it was Karen's turn to testify, she dug herself even deeper. Karen says, I maintain that this is all their fault. If they hadn't built their house there, none of this would have happened. Ma'am, are you suggesting that a stationary house is at fault for you driving into it while intoxicated? Well, yes. They should have better signage or something. I could see the judge struggling to maintain his composure at the absurdity of her claims. When the verdict finally came, it was everything we had hoped for and more. In the case of my last name versus Karen's last name, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is hereby ordered to pay damages in the amount of $2.5 million. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of shock. It was one of the largest settlements ever awarded in a case like this in our state. What? You can't do this to me. I'll appeal. You're welcome to try, ma'am, but I wouldn't recommend it. Additionally, your driver's license is revoked for 5 years, and you're sentenced to 18 months in prison for driving under the influence and reckless endangerment. Court is adjourned. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, still protesting, I was over the moon. The money from the settlement allowed us not only to repair our house but also to set up college funds for our kids and donate to organizations that help victims of drunk driving. Karen's actions had nearly destroyed our lives, but in the end, they made us stronger as a family and gave us a means to help others. As for Karen, last I heard, she had lost most of her fortune paying off the settlement and legal fees. Her high society friends had abandoned her, and she was facing a long, hard road ahead when she got out of prison. It just goes to show no matter how entitled you think you are, one day your actions will catch up to you eventually. And sometimes, those consequences come with a very hefty price tag. I've been looking forward to this movie night for weeks. My husband and I rarely get time off together, both working demanding jobs at the hospital. We're always on call dealing with emergencies and pulling long shifts. So when we finally managed to sync our schedules for a day off, we decided to treat ourselves to the latest blockbuster at our local theater. We arrived just as the theater opened, eager to get good seats and enjoy some overpriced popcorn before the show. Little did we know our simple outing was about to turn into a frustrating ordeal. As we approached the ticket counter, I noticed a woman at the front of the line who seemed to be taking an unusually long time. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was buying tickets for a large group or had some special requests. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that this wasn't a normal transaction. The woman, who I will call Karen because that's exactly who she was bombarding the young cashier with questions about the theater's loyalty program. She wanted to know every single detail, from how many points she'd earned per dollar spent to what exclusive perks she might get on her birthday. So, if I buy 3 tickets today, how many points do I get? You'll earn 10 points per dollar spent. And what can I do with those points? You can redeem them for concessions or future tickets. How many points for a free popcorn? This back and forth went on for what felt like an eternity. The line behind us was growing longer, and I could sense the collective frustration building. My husband and I exchanged looks, silently communicating our disbelief at the situation. Finally, after what seemed like 100 questions, Karen decided to buy her tickets. But of course, it couldn't be that simple. She pulled out a crisp $100 bill to pay for her 3 tickets. The cashier's face fell slightly. It was clear the register didn't have enough change for such a large bill so early in the day. He politely excused himself and called for a manager to bring more change. While we waited, Karen did not miss a beat. She started chatting up the manager, asking about the upcoming releases and complaining about the lack of healthy snack options. The poor cashier was trying to count out her change, but Karen's constant chatter was clearly distracting him. In his flustered state, the cashier made an honest mistake. He accidentally shorted Karen $10 in her change. Now, if it had been me, I would have politely pointed out the error and moved on. But not Karen. Oh no, this was her moment to shine. Excuse me, you've shorted me $10. Her voice was unnecessarily loud, drawing attention from everyone in the lobby. The cashier immediately apologized and moved to correct the mistake. but Karen wasn't done. This is exactly why you always count the change back to the customer, so this doesn't happen. She emphasized her words as if she were speaking to a child. Her tone dripping with condescension. The cashier's face turned red with embarrassment as he handed over the correct change. At this point, the couple in front of us had enough and moved to a different cashier. Then Karen moved to us. Can you believe how incompetent some people are? I was about to give an uncommittal response just to end the interaction, but my husband beat me to it. Maybe if you had stopped asking all those questions and distracting them while they were counting, it never would have happened. Karen's face contorted as if she'd just bitten into a sour lemon. She huffed indignantly and stormed off without another word. The cashier looked mortified as we stepped up to buy our tickets. I am so sorry about the wait. Can I help you with your tickets? No worries at all. It wasn't your fault. Don't let the Karens of the world get you down. The sweet smile of thanks that spread across his face made the entire ordeal worth it. As we walked away with our tickets, I hoped that Karen's movie experience would be less than stellar. Maybe her popcorn would be burnt or her soda watered down with too much ice. As we settled into our seats, my husband and I shared a laugh about the ridiculous scene we just witnessed. The lights dimmed and the previews began to roll. Just as I was getting comfortable, I noticed a familiar silhouette fumbling down our rows, muttering under her breath. To my horror, Karen plopped down in the seat right next to me, struggling with an overflowing bucket of popcorn and a massive soda. Can you believe they gave me stale popcorn? And look at all this ice. I'm going to have a word with the manager after the movie. I exchanged a pained look with my husband, realizing our peaceful movie night was about to become a lot more interesting. Sometimes, karma has a way of working itself out, even in the most unexpected ways. All my life, things were never easy between my mom and me. She always seemed to put herself first, and I often felt like I was just an afterthought in her life. When my parents divorced, it only got worse. She'd use me as a pawn in her games against my dad, never considering how it might affect me. As I got older, I tried to maintain a relationship with her, hoping that maybe she'd change. But every time I opened up, she'd find a way to make it about herself. When I got engaged, I foolishly thought it might be different. I mean, it was my wedding. Surely she'd be happy for me, right? Hell no. The day of the wedding arrived and I was a bundle of nervous and excitement. My dad and his girlfriend had gone all out to make sure everything was perfect. As I was getting ready, my best friend, now my husband, sent me a text that made me smile. Can't wait to see you. You're going to be the most beautiful bride ever, husband says. I replied with a heart emoji, feeling like the luckiest person in the world. But that feeling didn't last long. As guests started arriving, I got a glimpse of my mother. My heart sank as I saw what she was wearing. A black dress covered in white and rhinestones. It was flashy and attention-grabbing, exactly what I had asked her not to wear. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was just a dress, right? I couldn't let it ruin my day. The ceremony went smoothly, and as we moved to the reception, I hoped things would improve. But every time I looked for my mother, I'd see her cornering my father. Her face twisted in anger as she berated him. My poor dad tried to keep his cool, but I could see the strain on his face. Finally, I managed to approach her, hoping for at least a moment of motherly affection. Hi, Mom. I'm so glad you could make it. You look beautiful. Her words were cold, forced out like they physically pained her to say. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. You look beautiful too. She didn't respond, just turned away to talk to someone else. Throughout the night, she avoided me like I had the plague. As the reception was winding down, I made one last attempt to connect with her. Mom, would you like to take some pictures together? She didn't even look at me. Instead, she yelled across the room, "We're leaving now." And just like that, she was gone. No goodbye, no well wishes, nothing. My dad and his girlfriend were visibly upset. They tried to hide it, but as the night went on, my dad couldn't hold it in anymore. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I don't know why she has to be like this. You deserve better." I appreciated his concern, but it just made me feel worse. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and here I was feeling like I just lost my mother for good. As my husband and I said goodbye to our guests, I couldn't shake the feeling of grief that was settling over me. I felt like my mother had died or like she disowned me. Either way, it hurt me more than I wanted to admit. That night, as we settled into our hotel room, my husband could tell something was wrong. Hey, what's going on? You've been quiet since we left the reception. I broke down then, telling him everything. How my mother had ignored me, how she'd worn that attention grabbing dress, how she'd left without a word. He held me as I cried, listening patiently. I am so sorry you're hurting, but remember, you have a family that loves you. Your dad, his girlfriend, me. We're all here for you. His words helped, but the pain was still there. Over the next few days, as we prepared for our honeymoon, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I knew I needed to do something to find a way to cope with this loss. That's when I decided to write her a letter. Not to send, but just to get my feelings out. I poured everything into that letter, my hurt, my anger, my disappointment, but also my love, because despite everything, she was still my mother. As I finished writing, I realized that while I couldn't control my mother's actions, I could control how I responded to them. I could choose to let her behavior define my wedding day, or I could focus on the love and joy I felt marrying my best friend. I folded up the letter and put it away. Maybe someday I'd share it with her, but for now, it was enough to have written it. As my husband and I boarded our flight for our honeymoon, I felt peace wash over me. I had a whole life ahead of me, filled with love and possibility. And while the hurt from my mother's actions might never fully go away, I knew I had the strength to move forward and create the family I'd always wanted. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.